Hi everyone, thank you so much for... sorry everyone. Sorry everyone, had a little bit of background music there to just get me in the mood. So welcome everyone to our I was going to say breakfast session. Welcome to our lunchtime session. We have a special lunchtime session for you today. I'm really excited to be joined by a group of people from Legal & General who we've had the pleasure of working with over the past few months on some activity at the Fusebox, where we've been working with them to think about how they can utilise and take advantage of all of the exciting emerging technologies that we have here. And we thought it would be really interesting to bring together some of the staff from Legal & General to talk with you today about how they've been using immersive technologies within their work at Legal & General to help give you some thoughts and inspiration. So if you're here from a large corporate, then maybe it might give you some ideas of things that you could do within your teams. Or if you're from a smaller agency, it might give you some ideas of how you could potentially sort of do that at scale within your business. Or if you're a technologist, perhaps it give you some ideas for new products and services that you could develop. So really, it's a session where we can just learn from Legal & General, hear about what they're doing, and ask them any questions that we have. So without further ado, I'd really like to pass over to Phil Anderson, who is the Location Director and the Chief Operating Officer at the Hove branch. So Phil, should I pass across to you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. So, as Rebecca mentioned, I'm the Chief Operating Officer for our Institutional Retirements Division. I'm also the Location Director for Hove. So we've got almost 2,000 colleagues based in Hove now. As a result of COVID-19, of course, most of those are now working remotely, but we've got a number of business areas based in the office. And actually quite a considerable range of roles there, from more traditional finance roles to more creative roles in the digital tech and data side of things. And as far as that goes, certainly for our business, we're definitely on a journey where we're transforming not just about being a forward-thinking financial services business, but how we really use tech, data and innovation to set us apart from our competitors. But key to that is absolutely about creating a great place to work. And in the time that I've been in Legal & General in the last few years, it's been transformative, the direction that we've gone in. And today, obviously, you'll hear just a few examples of some of the things that we've done. So before the dreaded lockdown, we were progressing very well on this journey. COVID-19, perhaps unexpectedly, has accelerated much of that work. And our response to the pandemic has further demonstrated our commitment to how we're moving into a much more digital business and some of the capabilities we've got. We're also fortunate enough, of course, to have a base in a city which, as everybody on this call knows, is a great hub for digital technology and talent. And we really want to be part of that and part of the digital community in Brighton and Hove and beyond. So that's one of the reasons we've gone into partnership with Wired Sussex. And I'm really excited and proud to support an organisation that's doing such an amazing job supporting and connecting people in the digital sector across the Southeast. It's particularly important for us because as a fairly large business, sometimes it's harder to get a voice at that table because it's very much around kind of smaller businesses and freelancers. But it's great for us to have a voice like this. So I'm really appreciative of that. So we're looking forward to giving our people the opportunity to share what we're doing and learn from other businesses and freelancers ourselves as well. So as much as we share, well, I'm sure there's stuff that we can learn as well. So today is predominantly, as Rebecca said, about sharing what we've been doing. There were so many different things that we could have shared, and actually we had lists that were rather too long to fit into probably a day's webinar, let alone an hour. But what we've decided to do is to focus on where we're using technology to enhance the experience of our crucial asset, our people. And in particular, we're going to share how we're using technology to help us enable a really diverse and inclusive culture. Supporting our colleagues and doing their job more effectively and perhaps more enjoyably, and creating a truly digital workplace and community to connect and support our employees. So I'm here with my colleagues today, Catherine, Tarek and Steve, who are just some of our talented people who are going to helping us develop this tech and bring it all to life, and they'll share some of their experiences today. Gemma's also here to talk about her experiences as an L&G employee as well. So I hope you find the session useful and interesting, and obviously really keen and look forward to any questions that may arise today. So with that, I'll hand back over to Rebecca.
Thanks, Phil. That's really helpful and useful context. So as Phil said, we're going to be kicking off first of all with Catherine Kilpatrick, who is a resourcing business partner at L&G, and Catherine's going to talk to us a little bit about how her and her team have developed a tool to enable them to understand the diversity of their teams and how they can start to identify where there may be gaps and areas for improvement. So Catherine, would you like me to pass across to you?
Definitely. Thank you, Rebecca. This is so exciting. So as Rebecca said, I'm Catherine. I'm an in-house recruitment partner at L&G. So I support our business to hire new colleagues and promote existing colleagues. And one of my goals is to support L&G to recruit diverse teams. So two of my passions are diversity and technology. So at L&G, we believe that diverse teams are the best teams. And one of our reasons for this is research shows that diverse teams are more creative, more innovative, even better at problem solving, decision making. And diversity within teams means higher employee engagement and usually a better reputation for that team. So what do I mean by diversity? So essentially, I mean people from different walks of life, so different ages, a mixture of educational backgrounds, people who identify as LGBTQIA, or people who are BAME. So I'm now going to tell you a bit about our toolkit to show you how passionate we are at L&G about recruiting diverse teams. So we have developed a toolkit, Best Teams, and the toolkit aims to provoke you to think differently about your team, to challenge our typical patterns of thought and behaviour when making a decision on who we either hire or promote, essentially, so promote and develop. So companies with inclusive cultures and diverse talent are much more likely to meet their financial targets. They're more likely to be high performing, and they're more likely to be innovative and agile. And we really want to be innovative and agile as a business. So how Best Teams works, in summary, is firstly, you diagnose your team. And what I mean is you answer a series of questions about the team that you're in. An example would be, what educational backgrounds are your colleagues from? And then this is you assessing your team, by answering questions, you're showing gaps, you're showing strengths, and you're getting a better picture of how future ready you really are as a team. You then receive diagnosis, which will help you to understand the opportunity that a new hire would present to improve your performance in the future. The last step would be to make a plan of action. So work with your recruiting partner or your HR colleagues to develop a plan to promote or develop the best person for your team using the criteria that you've defined at the start. So that's it. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think that was really clear sort of summary. I've got a few questions I was just quickly making note of as you were talking there. So I might come back to those afterwards, all right, if that's okay. But if anyone who's watching has any questions, then please do pop them in the chat function on YouTube. I'm keeping an eye on that. So if there is anything that comes up, then pop them in there. We'll make sure that there's plenty of time at the end to cover anything that anyone would like to sort of delve in a little deeper about. So thank you, Catherine. I'm going to pass across now to Tariq Mayona, who is a digital product lead with Legal & General. And Tariq's going to talk us through sort of an enhanced intranet that's been built by Legal & General to provide a sort of central digital workspace. So Tariq, can I pass across to you?
Sure, thanks, Rebecca. Yes, I'm Tariq. I'm the digital product lead in our employee experience team, and that's a big clue there. Legal & General have an employee experience team, which is one of the great things about Legal and General is that we're trying to invest in that employee experience space. It's just as important to us as the customer experience. Without that, you can't build that great customer experience. So having a team where myself and my colleagues help build out a digital experience is a great thing to do. And one of the things we have done in the last year or so is build out our digital workplace. So most people in large organizations, small organizations have an intranet. We wanted to connect L&G across all of our different business areas. We've got, you know, from our construction businesses, investments, pensions, so many lines of businesses. We want to feel like one L&G, and our employees to all feel like we're part of the same, you know, cause. So having a digital workplace helps us to do that. And we built something that's a two-way platform, essentially. So you're able to have conversation, you're able to hear from the employer, you're able to see content that's authentic from our employees, our employee lives, but also manage work. And that's the key thing as well, as a productivity tool. So what you're doing here is you're coming in every day, you're seeing your work, you're seeing what's, you know, what you're spending the most time on with analytics, but also you're able to see what's going on in your region, but across L&G as a whole. And my role as a product lead is to bring that mindset internally. So we often hear you're building products for the customer, you're often hearing you're customer obsessed, you know, you're customer centric, but we're taking all of that knowledge and putting it internally to think about being employee centric. So as I would build an e-commerce journey, I'm doing the same internally for the employees. And essentially that means we're testing and learning. So all of us, no matter what role we have at Legal and General, we're all testers, we're all learners, and we come together. This platform we built is an MVP, as we call, as a minimum product, and it's a living and breathing thing that we're building. So essentially everyone tests it, everyone feeds back. We've got loops that say to us, right, we need to focus on what really matters for the employees. Let's change the design, let's change the journey. And that test and learn culture is something we breed at Legal and General because it's the future of scaling the business. So it's great to be a part of that, and obviously to build out a product like that at such a large scale that the employees are reacting to. And it's been great in the pandemic to help us steer situations like this where we can have capabilities virtual. So I'm going to lead into a video now that's going to show you the types of content that we have on the platform and give you a feel of life at L&G.
At Legal and General, we pride ourselves on putting our people first and caring about every individual and their future. That's why we offer a range of employee benefits to help you manage your money, your health, and your life.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the first of our video updates. From a design point of view, and using the sketch library, I can start to bring in some of the components that Alex just mentioned.
First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you. All of my colleagues have delivered this absolutely fantastic financial performance over the last 10 years. What we're seeing in the world right now is a wide recognition that inclusive capitalism is the way forward. Whether I've been in Japan or China or America or Europe, people are talking about, let's level up society.
Y'all ready for this? Y'all ready for this?
Thank you. That was so interesting to sort of see all those things that you've been up to, and I'm looking forward to delving a little bit more deeper into that later on as well. So, but now we're going to move across to Steve Barry. Steve is a knowledge-based architect at Legal and General, and he's going to talk to us a little bit about how Legal and General have been using artificial intelligence to provide a single source of real-time knowledge for staff and also a little bit about how him and his team have sort of encouraged and supported the adoption of that new technology within their team. So should I pass across to you, Steve?
Yes, thanks, Rebecca. Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we use AI to support our colleagues. So I'm a member of the knowledge-based team, and we're a small team of about 5. We support around 600 operational staff over 5 operational areas, and they take about 120,000 phone calls, customer phone calls every month. So that's a lot of phone calls, and they need to know a lot of information, and they need to be able to access it in the moment. So we began a project to see if we could make it easier for our colleagues to access information. We looked at where they currently got their information from, and the short answer was loads of different places, from the memory, from asking one of their colleagues, from old historic sources, or a training manual that they had when they started with the company from 1997. So all sorts of different places. We wanted to centralize all of this information so that we could control it and make it really easy to access. The idea being that this would give our colleagues a single source of the truth. So we launched an AI called Amy. Amy stands for Ask Me Everything. And in its simplest form, you ask Amy a question and Amy provides an instant answer. Amy uses a natural language processor to understand the intent of the person asking the question. And the engine also learns by the questions that are getting asked. So we designed Amy so that it was easy for our colleagues to use. It doesn't involve a login. And we wanted to create it so that it had things that were instantly familiar to our colleagues. So we incorporated things such as a search bar, a bit like Google, or questions that trend on their popularity, I guess a bit like Twitter. The option to share articles between colleagues, so it had that social media feel to it. And it's also thumbs up and thumbs down, so our colleagues could provide us with feedback. So we created this awesome piece of AI, and we launched it into the business 2 years ago, and hardly anyone used it. The next challenge was, how could we encourage our colleagues to start using Amy? So we did what everyone did would do in this situation. We ran an expo, or we started creating video content. We tried to promote it with lanyard stickers. We took down other information so that where people could get their information from, such as historic websites. We even ran an amnesty event where we went around the office with a wheelbarrow, confiscating old files and folders and incorporating it into Amy. All of this stuff kind of marginally worked, but the real game changer for us was when we started looking at the data. We interrogated every question that our colleagues were asking, and this really helped us understand their need. We created content off the back of this, and by doing this, we improved the usefulness of Amy. We ensured that anyone who was providing us with feedback and engaged, we were rewarding, and this built a community of users who are really keen to share their knowledge across the area. So in the first year of launching it, it went from 700 questions being asked each month to 7,000, and that's now doubled to 14,000. We've incorporated Amy into our new entrant program, and it's been really successful. They absolutely love it, and it's improved route to competency by a week. We've also seen record customer satisfaction scores. We think by people being able to have a consistent answer, so our colleagues getting consistent answer, that translates into our customers getting a consistent customer experience. So with more people working from home now, Amy has become a critical part of our operation, and it's embedded in the culture of what we do. So I'd like to play a short video with some of our colleagues talking about Amy.
Got one place where I can answer all of my questions and find out how to do simple tasks like resetting a direct debit or even complex policy change queries.
You don't have to spend so long typing it all in, it comes up as a suggestion, like Google does.
By asking it questions, it learns just like I learn on a day-to-day basis.
Information about current products, any telephone numbers that I need to transfer customers to.
Before Amy, Dealing with inbound contact from internal customers meant liaising with a number of departments, talking to a number of colleagues.
Ask someone else, like a floor walker or the person next to me.
Most useful thing on Amy is the most current products or topics that we have on there, because you find that is the most relevant thing to the business at the moment.
Made it much easier. Yeah, less stressful.
It's there for you when you need it. I can just use it as a simple like Google.
Thank you, Steve, for that. I've seen that there are some questions coming in already on the chat, which is fantastic. I'll go to those in just a moment. But before we do, I'd like to introduce Gemma Martin. Gemma is a Business Improvement and Readiness Manager at Legal & General. And Gemma's going to give us a little bit of insight into how, as an employee at Legal & General, she's found the adoption and the sort of support of these technologies and how that's sort of enhanced her experience at work. So, Gemma, should I pass across to you?
Yeah, thanks. Hi everyone. So as Rebecca says, my name's Gemma Martin and I'm a Business Improvement and Readiness Manager here at L&G. And I'm really passionate about change management, colleague engagement and supporting enabling our colleagues through the change journey. And today I wanted to share with you some of the ways that we've been using technology to help enhance our colleague experience and engagement. And whilst I haven't personally been involved in developing any of these are tools that I use on a day-to-day basis, both individually and then also as part of my team. So if we think back to the beginning of the year, in the middle of March, when the decision was made to stop all non-essential contact and anyone that could work from home should now look to do so, a large part of our organisation went from being in the office on a Monday to then working at home for the foreseeable future on the Tuesday. And there's no doubt that the technology that we had in place enabled that to be a really seamless transition. We've got a really great culture here at L&G and we've been able to keep that one team feel alive throughout this current climate. And we've been really lucky to have some celebrity guest speakers at special events designed to help connect us virtually outside of work. But in addition to that, in the day-to-day, there's been some tools that have really helped enable and support me to be able to do my best work. So if I think about a typical day here for me at L&G, I would typically start by visiting the hub. So that's the platform that Tariq mentioned, which provides myself and my colleagues with all of the current information, news bulletins, articles, events that's happening, my work activities, and a whole range of other useful information. And then I personally would look to log into a platform called Unmind. So making sure that we're all looking after our mental well-being in these uncertain times and beyond is a real significant focus for our leaders here at L&G, as they recognise that working from home for a really prolonged period of time is a new experience for us all. And Unmind was launched to us, which helps us as individuals take care of our own mental well-being. It's available to everyone here at L&G. And there's a whole host of variety of features and tools, which range from things like enabling you to help transform habits, to help you to build resilience, ways in which that you can boost your communication skills, and even tips on how to get better sleep. And then in addition to that, there's exercises and resources that you can download. So not just physical exercises, but also mental wellbeing exercises. So Pilates and yoga exercises. There's stretching activities that you can do whilst at your desk in between meetings, mindfulness and breathing exercises. And what I think one of my personal preferences about this particular app is something called a daily featured tool. And that is an exercise chosen at random every day for you to try out, which encourages you to be able to start your day with a great mindset and really high energy. Some other tools that are a real key part in my role here at Legal & General are things like Ideas Board and Whiteboard. So bringing people together to share content, to gather feedback, to capture ideas is a really big part of my role. And they're things that would traditionally have been done face to face. So having these tools in place not only allows me to continue to have these sessions, but it enables me to get really high levels of participation and engagement as part of those sessions, which is brilliant. And then lastly, a tool that I wanted to share with you really is something that's used across L&G and for a variety of different reasons, and that is an app called Kahoot. And for anyone that doesn't know what Kahoot is, it's a game-based learning platform which allows you to create multiple choice quizzes, and you can access that either by clicking on a browser or from an app. In addition to using this from an engagement point of view, so to help from an entertainment perspective, it was actually integrated and brought into L&G from our learning and development colleagues who brought this in a way to help to not only embed but reinforce the learning as part of their programs, as well as being able to add an element of gamification and fun. So that's just a kind of a quick glimpse into some of the ways that we are using technology to help enhance our colleague engagement. So thank you.
Thank you, Gemma. That was really insightful, and it really sort of brought to life some of those examples that we'd spoken about earlier. So as I said, I've seen some questions coming in. If you do have any questions, please do pop them in there, and we'll come to those in a moment. I might just kick off with a couple quickly, just that were burning in the front of my mind. I think particularly, Steve, when you were talking about Amy, I was just thinking, sort of, have there been any enhancements since you launched that? How have you kept that sort of up to date, and how has it progressed since you launched it?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when we first launched it, Amy had a lot of sort of binary answers, but we've definitely improved the technology so that we built in a chat bot for more complex questions. So Amy can actually ask you questions back and then direct you according to your answers to a more accurate answer. We've also created a ticketing system so colleagues can communicate across teams using a ticketing system through Amy. One of our key aims is to ensure that they don't need to go anywhere else. Everything can kind of be incorporated into Amy. So those are some of the key things. We're also now looking at how we can use APIs and integrate Amy into some of our operational systems, and also work alongside our automated robotics team. But just to say, content-wise, one thing that's been really popular is building a communications library. So we have all of the communications in a single place on Amy. So you've been away on holiday for 2 weeks, you come back, you don't need to go through your emails, you can just go straight onto Amy and you can see a big list of all the communications that are relevant to you. So yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Tarika, if I move to you next, I'd got a question which was going to be around sort of, I think it sounds amazing, this digital workspace, and I was sort of thinking about how could a small business perhaps create a similar tool themselves. And I see that we've also had a question from Julia, who asked sort of what made you create your own intranet as opposed to using something like, say, Microsoft Teams. So perhaps if you could, I guess there's sort of two questions in one, sort of what made you create your own version of an intranet, I suppose, and then also how could someone else potentially do something similar? Sort of what were those benefits?
Yeah, sure. So I think to start with, we use Microsoft Teams. We're a Microsoft house, and that's really important to us. And communication is a key pillar of a digital workplace. I think to build out an intranet or a digital workplace, I think it's important to build something that's unique to your business and actually solves real problems for employees. And often with out-of-the-box solutions, you're shoehorning into solving problems that don't exist really. So what we try to do is look at it from a product and a customer lens or the employee lens, say what is it we're trying to solve. And from you can go from these big multi-million-pound software houses and get a really nice shiny digital workplace, but it comes down to some core capabilities really. And the first one is communication, as you mentioned, Teams. And there's two types of communication. There's your asynchronous, the not so synchronous in real time, and then your real time. And what we're trying to do in a digital workplace is move away from relying on email, heavy reliance on email. We want more synchronous real time conversation. And that's what in any platform, whether it's a WhatsApp group or a chat group, you can start to do that in small businesses. Centralizing documents, transparency of information is a key. You want a transparent environment. It doesn't have to be something expensive. It could be a Google Share Drive, for example, or an Apple Cloud Drive where you share information and you work on things together. And then the third one is about how you make decisions. And I think that's really key, is look at the way you make decisions in your business. And when you move into a more of a digital workplace model, can you decentralize the way decisions are made? Can you start handing down power for decision making within the platform to enable people. Essentially, what the digital workplace does is enable people. So there are ways to do that without spending lots of money. And in smaller businesses, you have you've got more of an advantage that you can build a platform that can scale. So yeah, there's lots out there that you can do. And to the point made around Teams, that it's very important to have a communication channel, but it's also important to understand that the digital workplace is more than communication. It's about productivity. It's about the employee brand. It's about getting that message and the comms and the purpose of your organization across. And by building a digital workplace, we're able to incorporate it into Teams, actually. So our digital workplace sits within Microsoft Teams.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was really helpful. If anyone has any other questions, please do keep popping them in the chat, and we'll get through as much as we can in this sort of last half hour, where we can sort of have a discussion about this a little bit more. So coming to you, Catherine, next, if that's okay. I just wondered, I guess a similar question to the previous one. Best Teams sounds fantastic. How could a small business who is also interested in understanding about their sort of, I guess, their diversity DNA, how could they sort of do something similar?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I feel that any business of any size could implement their own version using the principles that I've shared. So it's all around the premise of kind of thinking about the demographics of your team, and thinking about where the gaps are. So the first step for a smaller business, whether it was 5 colleagues or 500, would be to get the team together and ask the question: if we were to bring a new person into the team, what could they bring, or what should they bring in order to improve our kind of combined performance? So where we started with Best Teams, because we're a larger business, we've obviously got the resources to develop, a really amazing whizzy toolkit. But for a smaller business, I suppose the first step would be to use PowerPoint, to use Excel, and to think about the principles and the premise of where the gaps are. That would be my advice.
Brilliant. And I was just thinking then when you were talking, we actually on our website, we have a diversity and inclusion toolkit. So perhaps we could put some sample questions together there, so that anyone who's thinking of doing this could go and have maybe a starting point where they could start to build this out for their own teams. I think that might be quite a practical way for us to help to share that. I'll make an action point to look at that sort of moving forward. I think another question that came in also for you, Catherine, sorry, bombarding you here, but we'd been asked, Tony has said that it was very interesting to hear about your views on diversity and inclusion. Have you considered using immersive technology as a training tool? And I guess that might go to a number of you, but have you considered sort of using immersive technology, and particularly around sort of around diversity and inclusion?
Sorry, I'm not sure I fully know what we mean by immersive technology.
I mean, there's a lot of work that's being done, I believe, with immersive technologies, where perhaps it would help provoke emotive responses, or to increase empathy in teams. So I don't know, Tony, if you want to elaborate on your question, but that's how I sort of read it. Are there ways that you're using these sort of emerging technologies and immersive technologies, so whether that be sort of VR or AR, or that's the sort of the most recent examples I've seen, where you might sort of use a virtual reality experience to create a sense of empathy.
Oh, okay.
We have tried to explore that. So I think we really want to use technology where it actually solves a problem, rather than trying to shoehorn technology in. And I'll give you some great examples of where we used immersive tech. It's used in our construction businesses as well, from the health and safety training perspective, where we've got people on sites essentially doing that. We've got accessibility, where we want to try and use voice, for example, from an accessibility perspective. And from a diversity and inclusion perspective, there is great opportunity there for immersive tech to use scenarios, for example, to help with unconscious bias and things like that. So we are exploring those. We haven't built them into the platform yet, but we're very much open to doing that.
Brilliant. And is that something that you tend to develop in-house, sort of looking at all of this expertise that you have at Legal & General? Is that sort of how, I guess for people sort of tuning in, maybe who are working in immersive technology, wondering about developing these products and services themselves, how would that process work from a Legal & General point of view?
I could talk a bit about that. Well, we're in the very early stages of looking into this stuff, but we've just bought a fusion camera, and we're starting to think about how we can use immersive technology. Obviously, we work in life insurance, and a lot of the times you're dealing with matters of life and death. How can we teach our colleagues to understand and empathise with customers better? And we're looking at using immersive technology as a route into that. So that's to do with sort of learning and development. So yeah, we've got the camera. We're starting to also use it for a piece that we're doing on inclusive capitalism, where we're looking at potentially creating a video. So you're walking along the street, you turn behind you, and in augmented reality, sort of homeless people, you might be in a wealthy city. So we're looking at using it for some campaigns as well. The other thing that we felt we could use immersive technology for would be to do with senior managers introducing themselves. So to do with induction. It's very difficult for senior managers to be able to get time to meet every single new entrant, but using immersive technology could be a great way to do that. So you're in the boardroom, the head of the division comes in, introduces himself, and talks about the company values. So it is something we're looking into, and it's obviously going to become more important in the coming months and years.
Brilliant. I really love the idea of sort of the immersive boardroom. That sounds, and I guess particularly at organisations like Legal & General, where you have such a large geographical spread, I think as sort of Phil was talking about at the start, what this current situation of sort of remote working and lockdown provided was a way to rapidly enhance some of those technologies and the adoption of those. So I think, that was, I think, I'm just trying to think about we've been doing a series on remote onboarding and HR as part of our breakfast sessions, and that'd be something really interesting to think about. How could you use that sort of immersive technology in that way? So thank you for that. One thing that stood out to me when I guess this is sort of an open question, perhaps directed to you first, Phil, is when you've all been talking, it really feels to me that there's this sense at Legal & General around sort of testing and learning and developing and experimenting. And I just wonder sort of how that's represented in your work at Legal & General. How do you create that culture where, there's this opportunity? It sounds really exciting, the things that Steve's looking to do around the immersive technology. How is that sort of, how do you, as a leader of a centre, promote that culture of testing, experimenting, failing, and create a sort of a space to do that?
Yeah, so I think there's probably multiple elements to that. I think the first thing is empowering people. So we are a financial services business, and therefore we're quite heavily regulated. And therefore there are lots of standards and regulation that we have to maintain. So what we need to be able to do is we need to articulate what the standards that people need to maintain and the framework within which they need to work, and then make sure that outside that we just create the room for people to breathe, if that makes sense. And there are a number of ways, literally in terms of some of our workspace that we've reimagined, so it's less sort of traditional desks and it's much more open spaces and much more collaborative spaces, and using some of the tech like Microsoft, the large Surface devices and so on and so forth. So that actually just creating that environment where the tools and the environment lends itself better to that. Organising ourselves in that way, so not running projects in waterfall ways, but using agile methodologies, talking about product ownership and actually empowering the people who the change will actually make a difference to control the change and changing the way we do it with the project manager. But more culturally, I guess, in our communications and actually bringing to life the things that we're experimenting with and showing people what we're doing, and asking our leaders across the board, investing in our people managers to kind of live and breathe those values. Really, it's about showing that flexibility and actually being brave sometimes about stuff, and I suppose supporting people when they make decisions that sometimes aren't necessarily the right one, and learning from them, etc. But just creating that culture where failure has its place, if that makes sense, and as long as you kind of learn from it, and people are empowered to do that. So I think it's probably a question you could talk about for hours, in fairness, because it's so deeply rooted in the culture, in the way that we communicate, in the way that we train people, in the way that we performance manage people. And it's a journey, it's an evolution for us as well. There's probably areas of that where some of our employees would say, oh, we haven't gone anywhere near far enough in that respect, and that's fine, because we've got the ambition. We just need to focus on those areas. So our quarterly digital employee survey, which is through Voice, a tool called Voice, that actually helps us get the feedback about the areas that are working and the areas that aren't as well. And very visible action in those areas is also hugely important to us.
Great. I just following sort of up on that, we had a question around whether there'd been any sort of resistance around using this technology from colleagues. I'm aware that, you know, I'm based in the Fusebox, where I'm surrounded by all of this emerging and immersive technology, and much of it, even from myself, who's sort of embedded in the digital community, it can feel a little overwhelming. I guess the question is sort of, have you found resistance with teams to adopt some of these new technologies, and how have you supported them in making the application of them more accessible?
I don't think resistance is the right word. I would say uncertainty, nervousness, and various other emotions, which are all entirely understandable. And therefore, as part of the kind of change management journey with our people, we need to focus on equipping people with the information they need and the tools and the training and so on and so forth. But I don't feel that we've had to counter resistance. In fact, my personal view would be that we've created a climate where, in many ways, we're probably still not moving fast enough for many of our people. We've ignited the fire, and now we've set ourselves a challenge to really keep up with the pace of change that many of our people expect to see. We have a very broad, diverse workforce. So some people are working at a pace where they want to see more and more change. Some people are slower adopters. I think that's just the rich tapestry of change management, and I can't imagine that we're any more or less unusual to anybody else in the sector. I don't know if anyone else from L&G, has a view on that.
I mean, there's an awareness, and that's the great thing about L&G. We're very aware of ourselves, and we're not, we're not brushing things under. We know we've got a large demographic. We've got a large demographic and an aging workforce, right from when you are an apprentice through to retirement age. It's across the country, and with that comes a varying digital capability as well. We've got people who are digital natives, people who aren't, and having that awareness helps us to embrace those individuals and take them on a change journey as well. And that's part of our role in the employee experience team, to do that. So yes, everyone reacts to change differently, but it's having the understanding that some people are at different levels in the digital capability, and part of our role is to build that capability up as we scale the business for the future.
Great. Any other thoughts? I know, Steve, you were sort of touching upon that with the launch of Amy, and how you'd managed to sort of, support that adoption through data. So I actually made a note of data, because from what everyone was talking about, it seems like Legal and General is a very sort of data-driven, sort of analytical company. That's something that I sort of took from that. So I guess, I just thought it was quite interesting that across all of your talks, I think with Catherine, you've been talking a lot about using data to drive your decisions around diversity and inclusion, and Steve talking about data for change management, I suppose. So how does that sort of play out in translating that back to your teams? How do you sort of use that data? Sorry, Steve, maybe I didn't frame that very well, but
sorry, I was.
No, I
was on mute. Sorry.
Sorry. I'll allow you to answer then if it was.
Yeah, I think data is really, really important. But I think the other aspect of it is really understanding the human, the human element of it. And also using behavioral economics when we launch things into the business, and understanding the psychology of people. Just one example was when we actually launched Amy, we've created a character which is actually a sort of robot, and it's kind of a smiley friendly kind of robot as one way to just kind of I suppose give Amy a face and make it seem more appealing. So that's the other side of it. So the data is important, but also it's really about understanding concerns and some of the the best things we've experienced is where we've gone into a group and we've just said to them two questions. What do you worry about and what do you need to do? And from asking those two questions, you can really dig into the psychology of some of our colleagues and really create solutions that are solving problems. And that's the other thing, is it's really important to make, I always say, let's make less solutions but make them really good, as opposed to just creating loads and loads of content. And the way you do that is you really understand what that need is. So that's one way that we kind of drill down into that psychology of what are people worried about and how can we create something that helps them.
And then one final point, actually, just on this point, because change management is absolutely what we do in my team every day. And what enables us to deliver change and help bring people on that journey is absolutely what everyone, my colleagues, have been talking about, but what you touched on, Tariq, really, in terms of change as an individual process. And no one person will go through that change journey at the same rate or the same way as anybody else. And it's what's key to success in terms of making sure that people understand the change and how it's going to impact them and helping them to go through that journey is the relationship that we have with the leaders in our business. So we very much equip our leaders to help their people go through that change. So as a change manager, I don't deliver those change managers. That relationship absolutely sits with the person's line manager, if you like, who has that established relationship. So lots of tools that we use, gamification, behavioural economics, ProSci and AdCarl to help us to take our people through that journey.
Thank you. Sorry, I was just quickly, we've seen more questions coming in, so I was just quickly having a read through so we can get through as many as possible. I saw Sam's messaged who said, has lockdown and remote working accelerated your plans? And I know sort of at the start we were talking about, actually what we've seen is that it's being already set up with a lot of these technologies has meant that you were better positioned for when lockdown came around. But has the situation that we now find ourselves in accelerated anything in particular within legal in general, or driven forward things that you may otherwise not have expected?
It has definitely accelerated our remote working capability for obvious reasons. With the lockdown in March, the remaining divisions that were more office reliant for some of their processes rapidly countered that to develop home working capability for obvious reasons. So where in certain divisions we've been on a journey and we had been gradually rolling out that way of working over a period of a year, perhaps 18 months, what we achieved in the space of sort of 2 to 3 weeks was considerable in terms of remote technology, remote training and kind of remote working. And now actually we're in a relatively stable model for that, given the time that people have had to spend working from home, which to achieve this degree of change adoption in a normal change management cycle would probably have been a couple of years, I think, in traditional terms, to be absolutely honest.
We, at our Skills Summit, we had a talk from Bruce Daisley, who said that he'd seen 10 years of workplace innovation in the space of 4 weeks, which I think when you look sort of particularly outside of digital businesses, I think that probably holds up.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually how technology has influenced our governance. So, for example, many of our steering committees and more formal meetings that are a necessary part of our roles would previously have been done predominantly in the office. There was probably a preference for people to be sat around a table in a room together, perhaps with a couple of people dialed in who happened to be working from home that day. The experience for the people working from home was suboptimal. The people in the room probably forgot they were there. The tech may not have necessarily stood up as much as we would have liked. And the dynamic of the meeting was probably a bit broken. And one of the things that we have recognised rapidly is that the deployment of Teams and virtual working has democratised governance. So now everybody in meetings has a more consistent voice. The meetings are far more efficient because there's less disruption with people banging around in a meeting room and, that kind of noise disturbance and meetings within meetings and stuff like that. So in many cases, one of the commitments we've already made to ourselves is that even if lockdown ended completely tomorrow, we were all vaccinated and we could literally go back to how things were, there are many things that we just simply wouldn't accept going back to how they were now. And certainly, for example, within my team, we've made a commitment that all our traditional governance type meetings will now be done virtually permanently. Even if someone is in an office, they'll sit at their desk and do it because it's democratized the experience. Of course, the flip of that is the things that people are really missing is those ability to collaborate and to think together and to innovate and to create. I think that's the things that people are really most missing about their time in the office. And I don't want any of our people or anyone else to think that we're working in extremes, that we're all at home at the moment, so we'll all go back to the office when this ends. We will find a hybrid model that's based on what works for our people, for the customers they look after, and for our business. And it will look one way or another very, very different to how it looked pre-COVID-19, because we will take and keep all the best bits and build on the bits that didn't work. So it's very exciting in that respect, amidst obviously a situation that's really, really bad.
Thank you. I had seen a question had come in to ask sort of what you think has been missed between the sort of the remote working versus sort of the traditional office working, but I think you've probably covered that quite nicely. But an additional question that was asked was what sort of roles you think could remain remote. I don't know if there's anything sort of specifically you wanted to touch upon there, or whether there was any sort of follow-up question about the types of roles, because I suppose it's quite an open question.
Well, within a certain tolerance of common sense, the pandemic has proven that pretty much every role in our business can now be done remotely. There's some obvious exceptions. Somebody who greets visitors in one of our buildings, you know, those sorts of things, and some of our mail room, post room people who have to physically process things like that. But things like customer contact centres, all the areas of our business that in effect run the business, we've proven can be done at home. The degree of effectiveness to which they're done at home varies, and that needs to be reviewed. But I at this stage wouldn't be picking out particular roles that we think will stay at home, or particular roles, because I think what we've proven is that everything can be done more at home. What we need to think about is more the activities within roles that don't work so well at home. You can't even generalise, for example, to a contact centre of people who are handling calls about customer bereavements. It is not a good experience for them to do that remotely. They need the interaction with their colleagues. It's not the most, positive of experiences for them. So therefore, although the task potentially could be done remotely, it's far better for their well-being if they're together in the office. In other cases, many contact centre workers love the opportunity to just get on with it at home and balance, their work-life balance in different ways. So the answer is they can all be done at home sometimes, and they probably all have in-office needs sometimes as well. And that's the balance we've got to find.
Yeah, and I think particularly picking up on that point around mental health, I think that's something we've been looking at a lot. Sort of, it's not just the operational task of doing your work at home, but how does that affect employee mental health, and how can employers start to address that if we're looking at this as a long-term solution? Yeah, agreed. I suppose the other point on that is that prior to the lockdown, everybody who was then working from home predominantly had a relationship with somebody already because they'd worked with them in the office, they knew them, they had that familiarity. Over time, as we onboard new people who haven't had that opportunity, it's going to get harder for them because they don't have those existing human relationships to build upon, and we need to find ways to help people get those as well. So it is complex, and we need to be really careful not to generalise and just say it's going to be all one thing or all another. Another question that's come in, which I'll sort of leave this open to whoever wants to pick it up, but the question was, it was more of an invitation for a conversation, I suppose. Pete said that he'd be interested to hear how you're using gamification, and I feel like a number of people have touched upon that in different ways, so I don't know if someone would like to kick off on that.
I can start on that one. So I guess as you move to more of a virtual model, it becomes a lot harder to show recognition. And I think, with organizations that have grown, whether they're, tech startups and scale ups, they've always had the notorious ones, like, say, for example, Salesforce, for example, or Google, they have a very heavy badge culture where from induction through to completing courses, you get badges, you're awarded things, you build a profile. And I guess that becomes your persona, your brand almost. And it's the same when we're looking at social media, and it's the same in the workplace where we need to build our own, portfolio of what we deliver to the organization. And I think gamification helps with that. And we are exploring gamification at the moment, even in our learning and development space. It's really important for us to, even if it's mundane, compliance-based training that everyone has to tick the box and do, we want it to be a fun experience. We want it to really have some meaning. So we're trying to use gamification to show individuals peer to peer, how your training's going. Essentially, I know Gemma mentioned using Kahoots and things like that, so maybe you want to explain a bit more about that.
So I mean, Kahoot is one platform. So as I said, it enables you to build a multiple choice quiz. So you can use it from a fun element, just as we use that as part of away day sessions. But then also from an L&D perspective, in terms of reinforcing learning. So there's a couple of programs. We have a Step Forward program where we deliver a range of different deliveries. And a part of that, I deliver a project management course to people. And at the end of that, we have a Kahoot session. It's a bit of fun, but then it's an opportunity actually at the end of the day to understand, have people taken in those messages and has some of that learning stuck. On a personal level, from a gamification point of view, we use that in terms of understanding the positioning of change. So understanding those core motivators, we kind of go around that gamification wheel, if you like. So yes, we do the budgets, and yes, we do, the social influence in terms of the leaderboards and things. But actually, of all the core motivators for a particular change, how does each one of those impact this particular change and this particular audience? So, what's the epic meaning for somebody for this part, and how do I use that information to then influence the change? So there's lots of different aspects, and I think we probably all use it in similar ways and then in very different ways. But it's a really useful tool that certainly my team have been using for a number of years from a change management perspective.
Thank you. I'm aware we've still got more questions coming in, and we're fast running out of time. So maybe I'll just try and cover one last one. And if someone could answer this just in a minute. It said, I think particularly looking at that remote working, do you think that micro interactions that occur at work can be replicated through technology? And is there some emotional aspect that is missed when we're just talking through text? So I don't know, I guess that's more of a philosophical.
Yeah, I mean, I would take that one. No, I don't think you can replace the humanity of our conversations and our interactions. There's lots of things you can do digitally. And again, we shouldn't fall into the trap of saying it's one or the other. So there are some social interactions that can still work quite well on a Teams or Zoom meeting, and you don't feel like you've lost stuff. But there's nothing that beats sitting down with someone and having a cup of tea and a natter. So I've yet to see a digital experience of that perhaps is always as rich. So as long as we find the balance between the two and we give people different choices, and I think we'll get it sussed.
Very quickly, there's a reason why Apple made their new Office circular. It's because of natural collisions. They want everyone to collide naturally and come up with innovative ideas. So there is a science behind it, yeah.
Thank you both very much. I'm always keen to try and wrap these up on time because I'm aware that people have back-to-back meetings often. So I just want to quickly say thank you again, all of you, for your time today and for sharing all of your insights. As I said at the start, a number of the Legal and General team are residents of the Fusebox. So if you're a resident, feel free to go and say hi to them, drop them a message. Or otherwise, I can, if you get in touch with me, I'm happy to sort of make contacts for you. So yeah, thank you so much for being a part of this event, but also a really important part of our sort of ecosystem that we have here at the Fusebox. So it's really great to have you involved. Also, just a quick heads up that we have another event this evening that a number of you might be interested in, which is kindly sponsored by Legal and General, which is our Women in Tech and Innovation. So that's this evening at 7 o'clock. I'll pop a link to that in the chat of this YouTube video. So if you haven't signed up to that yet, sign up to that. I'd really encourage you to. If you're here from the sort of HR operations side of things, we've got an event on Thursday that you might be interested in, Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, which is looking at how and what you should budget for around remote working. So if that's sort of on your agenda at the moment, then come along to that event on Thursday. And finally, for any sort of web development people out there, there's Brighton Web Development Meetup, which is being run on Thursday the 29th at 7 o'clock, and I'll post a link to that in the chat as well. So lots more events happening. But for this event, just a huge thank you again to everyone for taking part. Also, a big thank you to your colleague Lucy, who has been masterminding this event, and so a big thank you to her and my colleague Chris, who's sat doing all of the tech wizardry. So it's been brilliant to do this with you. Great to see all the engagement from our attendees, and I look forward to working with you more in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Bye.